Welcome to Warrior Commission Now, where we talk about practical ways to live your Warrior Commission right now in your day to day as you grow in your relationship with God. I am Christine Caston.
And I am Sharon Rudolph.
And Sharon and I are excited about the conversation today. We want to talk about God's divine care. These are conversations that have come really out of conversations that we've had over the years, and we just felt like there were some great nuggets that, as we have our conversations, that maybe you might be able to tap into and hopefully be encouraged by as you go about your day, things that you can apply to your life in each moment of the day. So today, Sharon, we're going to talk about God's divine care, and we talk about how God knows what we need even when we don't understand. And,
Yeah.
and it seems like there are certain times in our lives that sometimes we have a clearer picture than other times.
Yes.
Especially with all the stuff going on in this day and age with our new normals and the things that we're trying to figure out with the things going on in our society, in our world today. I think this is a really good opportunity for us just to explore what it is to trust in God's divine care. So,
Yes.
so I know Psalm 138:8 talks about the Lord will accomplish what concerns me. Your loving kindness, O Lord, is everlasting. Do not forsake the works of your hands. Um, and there's just so much in that, but I would love for us just to um, talk about God's loving kindness.
Okay.
so so Sharon, what are your thoughts? What would you like to share regarding the loving kindness of God in relation to God's divine care with us?
Well, I think that verse you mentioned, Psalm 138:8, the Lord will accomplish what concerns me. And just the concept that he understands what I'm concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
He understands that.
Mm-hmm.
And that he's going to help things come to pass in a way that accomplishes what concerns me. And so whether it's job, whether it's family, whether it's that vacation that this year isn't, been able to happen, and those sorts of things, and that he understands about those things, and his loving kindness is new every morning. Another verse that he
Scripture just runs all through.
but I think a lot of times people get um confused because we have a definition of what is loving kindness.
Right.
And it's not necessarily God's definition of what is loving kindness, because he can see the end from the beginning,
Right.
and he knows how it really needs to be.
Right.
My daughter was in a situation, she got laid off, but then she got unemployment to figure out the career move she wanted to make.
Mm-hmm.
And as things have started to open back up, she now has a job she loves. So at the time when she got laid off, it was really hard. And yet we were able to watch how God worked her through. She trusts him more. And now she's been able to make that career change. So being able to take a look at what's going on around us, I think sometimes it's the whole being able to see the world as the glass half full instead of the glass half empty, and even being willing to look for, okay, what is the good in this, and where might God's loving kindness be? And I think that's where prayer comes in, because it's okay for us to ask, right. God, I'm not getting this. Help me understand.
On my head, on my forehead, right here. It's just right here.
Yes.
Help me understand.
Yeah. And I love how in the Warrior Commission we have different questions that we ask. We do a lot of intercession, and oftentimes the question isn't, why me, God? The question is, God, what are you up to? Or God, what do you want me to know? And that opens up a whole different conversation. Because we're not victims. If he's accomplishing what concerns us, we're not victims.
Exactly. And I think that the questions are so important because the questions set our focus. You know, if we say, why me? Then we're actually self-focusing, right? We're saying, oh, this is happening to me. We set ourselves into a position of what's happened to us. And then everything becomes a for or against mindset. You know, that person is against me, that those people at that job were awful because they did this to me, and bitterness and anger and resentment and unforgiveness become a normal part of our lives, and that's not what God wants, right? So when we ask the questions of God, how are you moving in this, what we've found, my husband has transitioned through we've gone through several job transitions in our in our marriage. It's been an incredible time, because in those transitions, some of them lasted 2 weeks and some of them lasted up to 8 months. So we had different ones, and it was really fantastic, because when we got to the one that was the 8 months, which happened to be the last one, at the beginning of it, actually, it wasn't the last one, it was the second to last one. But anyway, at the beginning of it, God said, well, this is going to be longer than you expect. And there was something that God did in that extra long time frame, of building our trust and hope, because he had already established in the ones before, that in those transitions before, that we could trust him, because my husband always landed in a better situation than he was in before. Right. You know, there was something about that situation that was much better. And so when we talk about the loving kindness of God, a lot of times we can't see it in the moment, but right. As we move through and as we learn to trust him better, we begin to see him and how he's moving and how he's
right.
And I think that that's part of God's plan for redemption for us. You know, we are saved at the moment that we accept him as Lord of our life, but then he's in the process of continually redeeming what's not of him in us, right. into right. what is of him, right? So mm-hmm. we're in that process. We would call it spiritual growth or spiritual maturity,
right?
Growing up in God, those kinds of things. And so there's this process of God establishing his true heavenly DNA in us, in that time and in that process of our growth. And those seasons that are those interim seasons are when we can actually stop, pause for a moment, see his loving kindness in action, and see him moving in ways that we never really imagined, and I think one of the things we kind of were kicking around before we started we pushed go on this was the idea that God's justice looks different.
Yes.
Than what our justice might be.
Yeah.
And we typically, as human people, will choose a form of justice that best has vengeance. Like you treated me
right.
bad, you should be treated badly. We tend
right.
to eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And in this time of divine grace, in this New Testament life that we live, God's justice may be a little different. So Sharon, what are some thoughts you have on what God's divine justice might actually look like for a person that maybe we feel wronged us or us, or let us go, or whatever that might be? What is your perspective on that?
Well, I think it's easy for us to forget that God loves the other person as much as he loves us.
Right. Yeah.
That Jesus died for that other person, just like he died for us. And I think in our culture, we want to hang on to that Old Testament mindset of an eye for an eye. And so the movies we love are when the bad guy gets blown up, right? Let's have some action adventure here, and let's go rescue the heroine and save the village, and the bad guys get blown up, But what if What if there's a story in the Bible where an army is coming and Elijah asks God and they're all just blinded. And then he walks them over to the king's house. He walks them into the kingdom where the king's is sitting, and the king said, okay, do I kill him? And Elijah says, no, let's feed them and send them home. Mm-hmm. And they fed them and they sent them home, and that army never came back and attacked Israel. It's a little terrifying being blinded, so that was enough. God knew exactly what they needed, and they didn't come back. And it changed their perspective of Israel. They left Israel alone. And Jesus, these people, he knew these people were going to crucify him. And yet he still spent 3 years healing them all over the place. Many times it said he healed all their diseases. And yet he knew that same crowd was going to be shouting, crucify him.
Right.
God's justice looks different because he's thinking of what's best for all of us.
And even closer was Judas.
Oh, yeah.
Was on the 12, right?
Yeah.
He knew Judas would eventually betray him. He knew that there would be a time when Judas would choose to assert what he felt was the thing that Jesus should be doing.
Right.
In Rome, right? And force his hand, as opposed to understanding what God was actually up to. And Jesus chose to love him anyway. And bring him into his inner circle of the 12. And and that is God's divine care, because through that time, Judas had an opportunity to hear and see and know the heart of Jesus through that interaction, through those conversations, through those special conversations that only the disciples got to hear.
Right.
So God brings us in and gives us an opportunity to restore, to refresh, to be given a choice in what happens. And I think you have a story about your marriage and how God's divine care moved into your heart in the process of some really hard stuff. So would you maybe share that story that we can kind of see God's divine care in action, in real life, in our lives in this day and age?
Yeah, so we've been married about 13 years and things had just gotten messy. And there were, I had 4 kids. The oldest was 11 and the youngest was like 2. Ricky was little. And things weren't going well. And we were not communicating well. And I had a lot of issues. And it was really easy for me to blame my husband for all of them. And at the time, I had a relationship with God. I would go and sit and pray, and God would help me understand, I'm working in this. And finally one day I'd said I'd had enough. And I said, God, I've had enough. I need to leave. And he said, okay, if that's really what you want to do, you can do that. So all of a sudden I didn't feel trapped. I'm trapped in this marriage. Oh, it's terrible. Anyway, drama. And so I took about 2 weeks and I was continuing to pray, thinking, oh, good, this can be different. And finally, after about 2 weeks, mind you, I have 4 kids. So I'm like, okay, Jesus, I'm having a little trouble with an exit plan here. Would you help me with the exit plan? And he said, well, did you ask me what I wanted? No. And I just wanted it to stop. I just wanted how I felt to be different. I didn't think to ask Jesus, okay, Jesus, what do you want here? And he said, well, I want you to stay because I'm going to do something that you don't expect. And I need you to stay for that to happen.
Mhm.
I want your children to have something different. And you need to stay so I can do that. Oh,
Not quite the answer you were looking for.
no, no. But there was a huge shift
Mhm.
in that, because all of a sudden it wasn't about me.
Mhm.
It was about what Jesus wanted to do.
Mhm.
Now, mind you, I had to be patient.
Right.
We have now been
Well,
married.
God is saying-
Yes. And so we've been married 32 years now. We have stuck it out. I have 4 amazing adult children, 2 grandchildren, and we laugh so much. And it is so beautiful. And at Christmas, my kids don't have to figure out where they're going to go. They just come to mom and dad's house. And my husband and I actually like each other now. We spent some years getting some help, doing some counseling, working through some things. And some of it was really, really hard. Some of it was really hard.
Mhm.
But hard isn't bad.
Right. Exactly.
And when you're walking with Jesus,
Mhm.
everything is different.
Right. And you have 2 people who really do want it to work.
Yes.
You know, and as you look to God and as he, I mean, sometimes what I love is we're always like, oh, change, you know, we would say change
Yeah.
him. You know? My husband, God says, well, how about I change you?
Right,
You know?
right.
And a lot of times, yes, there may be things that the other person may need to have as, you know, change, but a lot of times it's so much about God's divine care is about us understanding and walking in the truth of who we are in Him and in
Yeah.
that relationship and learning what His nature is for us, His heart toward us, His divine care, and the way He moves. He knows where we are. I mean, He's
Yes.
not like, it's not like a surprise to Him. I mean, it's not like we throw a temper tantrum and He says, oh, where did that come from?
Right.
So he's, you know, he's in that place of helping us get past that childish
Yes.
mindset, those childish mindsets, that immaturity, and move into a place of greater love, greater compassion, greater connection with Him, and through that we are able to have greater connection with others,
Right.
whether that be friends or our spouse or who knows what else, you know. But it is so incredible. I mean, we could talk about this, I know, for a really long time.
Yes.
Because there's so many, there's like, as you're talking, there's so many stories. I'm like, oh yeah, and God did this and God did this and He did this. So if you're out there and you have listened to this story and this conversation, I would love and encourage you to just spend some time thinking about how God has divinely cared for you. And just maybe jot this down. I mean, it could be bullet points, it could be, you know, written paragraphs, whatever. Just write them down, even on a sticky note, and put that sticky note or, you know, that paper somewhere where you can see it and remind yourself, hey, this is how God took care of me in these times. And especially if you're needing encouragement right now with how God is moving and active in your life, it might be a good reminder to build faith and trust on the faithful one who
Yes.
loves you. So we would love for you guys to check out thewarriorcommission.com. It is our community. A lot of this stuff we gained through the process of understanding and training in deeper relationship with God and what that looks like and what maturity looks like in our lives. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next YouTube channel video, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.